I did not expect to survive. That thought arrived with a strange kind of calm, the way terrible things sometimes do when they have already happened, and your mind has accepted them before your heart has. The emergency lighting in the Venshar had shifted to amber 40 minutes ago, and in that amber glow, everything looked like the last moments before something ends. Corridors that had felt ordinary for 6 weeks now looked narrow and close. The hum of the ship, which I had long stopped hearing, had become something I listened to constantly, waiting for it to change. 3 of our crew were sealed in the forward compartment. Miracel and old Okrath stood beside me in the command bay. We did not speak much. There was not a great deal to say. The hull fracture was in a section we could not reach safely, and it was slowly drinking our atmosphere into the void outside. The Karath Nebula drifted beyond the viewports in long curtains of violet and deep blue, very beautiful, completely indifferent to us. Life support reserve at 39%, the ship announced. It had been saying something like that every 4 minutes. Each time, the number was lower. Okrath looked at the navigation display for a long moment. He was the oldest member of our team, a careful and precise man who had spent 40 years doing exactly the kind of survey work we had come here to do. He folded his arms across his chest in the way our people do when something has been decided and cannot be undone. "Send the distress signal," he said. "We are 11 light hours from the nearest relay beacon," I said. "There are no registered vessels in this corridor. The probability of anyone receiving it in time is—" "Send it anyway," he said. "All frequencies. Every emergency protocol we carry. Someone may hear." I sent it. There was nothing else to do. We sat with the silence after that. Miracel, who was on only her second deep space posting and had handled everything with remarkable steadiness until now, kept her eyes on the communications board. I watched the life support counter. Okrath looked at the nebula. The ship continued its quiet, slow announcement every 4 minutes, and each time the number was lower than before. The response came 47 minutes later. I was watching the counter read 33% when the communications board came alive. The signal was on the Galactic Standard Emergency Channel, which any species could receive and transmit on, but the encoding beneath it was unlike anything I had encountered before. Dense, layered, complex in a way that made our own system pause for nearly 3 full seconds before it could read it properly. 3 seconds. Our system had never paused before. Then the voice came through. It was even and clear and carried no panic in it at all. It said that it was the THS Unbroken Meridian, that it had received our distress signal, that it had our coordinates, and that we should maintain our current position if we were able. It told us not to vent atmosphere. It said that its medical team was ready, and that it would arrive in 14 minutes. 14 minutes. Miracel made a sound that was barely a sound at all. Okrath turned to look at me, and I looked back at him, and for a moment neither of us said anything. "Human," I said. It was the only word necessary. Okrath nodded slowly and uncrossed his arms. I went back to the navigation data and checked our position, and then checked it again, because the number 14 did not make sense given where we were. A ship responding from any reasonable position in this patrol corridor should have needed far longer. I found no error in my calculations. The math simply did not produce 14 minutes, unless the vessel in question had been moving at a speed that most of what I would call normal traffic did not move at. We heard them before we saw them. Not through sound, since there is no sound in deep space, but through our sensors, which registered a pressure change, a sudden density in the data, as though a significant amount of mass had decided to exist nearby, and the surrounding space had quietly adjusted to accommodate it. Then the transit fold opened, and the unbroken meridian came through, and I understood why our system had taken 3 seconds to process their signal. The ship was enormous. I do not use that word lightly. I have seen colony vessels and deep space freighters, and Vorun transport barges, which are famous among xenobiologists for being some of the largest mobile structures any known civilization has constructed. Where those ships are large in a spread-out, assembled way, this one was large in a concentrated way, as though every part of it had been placed exactly where it was, for a specific and considered reason. The hull was a dark gray-black, with a surface that did not reflect light, so much as absorb it. There were ridges along its body that I recognized, from academic papers I had read in a professional capacity and never expected to see confirmed in person, as weapons systems. There were more of them than seemed strictly necessary. There were, in fact, significantly more of them than any purely rational calculation of defense would require. Unless, of course, you were human. The commander's voice came again through the communications channel. She introduced herself as Commander Adaize Nwosu. She told us that a docking collar was being positioned on our port side, that her medical team was ready to board as soon as the seal was confirmed, and she asked a single practical question: could our crew move under their own power? I told her yes. I also asked how they had arrived so quickly. There was a brief pause. Then she said, "We were in the area." Miracel looked at me. I looked at Miracel. We both knew the numbers. We said nothing. The docking process took less time than I expected. Their equipment was precise, and the collar locked onto our hull with a gentleness that felt almost careful, as though the people operating it understood that they were attaching something very strong to something that was already damaged and needed to be handled accordingly. Then a section of corridor opened between our two ships, and they were there. 6 of them, in fitted gray and black suits, moving with the kind of quiet, practiced coordination that comes from people who have spent a great deal of time working in environments where a mistake is not an inconvenience, but a consequence. 2 of them carried medical equipment. One of them, a woman with efficient hands and a focused expression, was already moving toward our ventilation coupling with a portable atmosphere pack before anyone had said a word to her. She connected it to our system without being asked. Our atmosphere loss became manageable, just like that, because she had thought to bring the correct tool and had known exactly where to put it. Their medic knelt beside Miracel and looked at the injury on her arm and said, in a voice that was quiet and completely certain, "Okay, I've got you." 3 words. Miracel had held herself together for 2 hours, through genuine fear and physical pain, and the particular exhaustion that comes from not knowing if you are going to survive. She held together through all of that. Those 3 words were what finally made her eyes go wet. I have thought about that many times since. Commander Nwosu was tall, even by the standards of a species I knew to have considerable variation in height. She had the quality of someone who had spent years being responsible for outcomes that mattered. She looked at Okrath, then at me, and said, 6 crew, all accounted for? Yes, said Okrath. Good. She did not dwell on it. The word came out with a small, clear relief, and then she was already asking the next question, already working forward. She asked what we had been surveying, listened carefully while Okrath explained, and while she listened, she was also monitoring a device on her wrist, and watching her crew's movements, and tracking information on a small display near the docking collar. I have read that humans have comparatively limited capacity for processing multiple things at once. I have concluded that this literature was written by researchers who had not observed many humans doing their actual work. They repaired our ship in 6 hours. This is the part I find myself returning to most often, because it is the part that still does not feel entirely real to me, even though I was present for it. The fracture in our hull was not a small problem. Our own assessment had placed the minimum repair time, in a proper space dock facility with correct equipment, at 4 days. Their chief engineer, a man who had the specific kind of cheerful distraction that belongs to people who are happiest when a problem is interesting, spent 6 hours in our damaged section with a team of 4. They used materials from their own ship, and a fabrication unit that he referred to, without any irony I could detect, as a patch kit. At one point, he came to ask me a question about the composition of our hull alloy. He seemed genuinely fascinated by it. He asked if he could keep a small sample for his records. I said yes. He thanked me with the enthusiasm of someone who had just been given an unexpected gift. Commander Nwosu invited me to the observation deck while the work continued. I think she understood that I was the kind of person who finds waiting easier when there is something to understand. The observation deck looked out on the nebula, which from inside that great dark ship looked even more vast and quiet than it had from ours. Standing there, I could also see the full silhouette of the unbroken meridian below the glass, its lines hard and certain, its weapons platforms holding their patient attention outward in every useful direction. I asked her how long she had been assigned to this region. 7 months, she said. Their patrol arc covered roughly 40 light years. In a given year, they might receive 3 genuine distress signals from this corridor. Most signals were automated, from equipment that had been left behind, or had malfunctioned. Some were nothing at all. "And when the signal is real?" I asked. She looked at the nebula for a moment before she answered. There was something in her expression that I found difficult to name. It was not pride, though pride was present. It was not simply the satisfaction of doing a job well. It was something quieter and heavier than that, something that had to do with the choice to be here at all, in this specific empty corridor of space, for 7 months, carrying the weight of being the answer when the answer was needed. "We come," she said. She showed me the operational logs from those 7 months, patrols and sweeps, and 3 previous responses to real distress signals. I read through them in the way I read scientific data, looking for patterns and meaning. All 3 responses had ended with crews recovered. The logs noted this without ceremony, as though it were simply the result that had been intended and had been produced. I thought about what it meant to live that way, to spend months crossing space that most ships avoided because there was nothing profitable in it, to know that somewhere in that empty arc there might be someone whose life support counter was reading 33%, and to have decided in advance that when that moment came, you would be the thing that answered. To have chosen, before the situation existed, what you would do when it did. Humans have a way of talking about this that does not translate neatly into our language. Something about standing between a threat and the thing it would destroy. Something about having already made the calculation, before the danger arrived, about what you were willing to be. I have read about it in history texts and political philosophy and accounts of their various conflicts across the centuries, and I had thought I understood it in an academic sense. I had not understood it at all. Okrath thanked Commander Nuosu formally when we prepared to leave, in the traditional manner of our people, which communicates the acknowledgement of a debt that cannot be balanced. She received it with the same practical warmth her medic had offered Miracel, genuine and unperformed, and already looking forward. "Safe travels," she said. "There's a relay station at Jova 9 that tracks the debris movement in this corridor. Worth checking in with them before your next survey run. Would have saved you some trouble." "We will," said Okrath. She nodded and stepped back, and their systems released us, and the unbroken meridian held its position nearby while we ran our initial systems check, dark and patient against the violet light of the nebula, like something that had decided to remain until it was certain we were truly all right. Then their drive systems activated, and they were simply gone. The space where they had been indistinguishable from the space around it. Nothing left to show they had ever been there at all. We filed our incident report 3 days later. Miracel wrote the factual portion. "Assisting vessel, response time, repair time, crew recovered." She started to write a description of the ship, and stopped and erased what she had written, and sat quietly for a moment. I asked what she had been going to say. She thought about it. "I was going to write that it was frightening," she said. "The ship, all of it. The guns, the speed, the way they moved. I was going to write that we were afraid." She paused. "And then I thought that was the wrong word. It was not fear, not really." I asked her what the right word was. She did not answer for a while. When she did, she said that she was not sure our language had it. She said it was the feeling of being the smallest thing in a very large, dark place, and understanding, suddenly and completely, that something enormous had turned its attention toward you not to harm you, but to make sure that you were safe. She said it was the feeling of the communications board lighting up when the counter reads 33%. She said it was 14 minutes. I think she was right that our language does not have the word. I have checked several translations. The closest any of them come involves the idea of a weight being lifted by something strong enough to hold it, and even that is not quite accurate. Perhaps we will need to invent something new, or perhaps we will simply need to borrow it from the humans, who seem to have understood this particular thing for a very long time.